Okay, here we are. Good evening. My name is Tomas Avila, and welcome to the 12th episode of what I have titled the Latino Leadership 2020. And starting tonight, I actually have added uh, the tag Black and Brown 2040. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And very much this comes from an experience of participation in the growth and the political empowerment of the Latino community for the past 20 years. I was very engaged with many friends throughout the years, and I seen that evolution of the community from one elected official back in 2000 to 24 today. And in that process, based on my historical account and my research, we have elected 40 Latinos to elected office in those 20 years. 24 are serving, and there's another 16 or more that actually lost or decided not to seek elected office again. So these conversations have been in celebration of that path and that success. Tonight, when I mention the black and brown, is because as I was sharing with the guests, I love history and I love research and I love documentation. And in looking back to 20 years ago, very much the growth of Rhode Island has been the Latino community. Is well documented and is you can see it everywhere. But in my research and my conclusion, going forward, the next 20 years is going to be about the black and brown community. It's going to be a growth and participation never seen before, at least in my lifetime. And very much, needless to say, looking at Rhode Island history, not even in Rhode Island's history. So that's what part of what this conversation is going to be about. Cranston has had within 1990 and the present a growth of black and brown of 80%. Uh, it has grown rapidly in the black and brown community to the point that it displaced Warwick from being the second largest city in Rhode Island back in 2008. And now the second largest city in Rhode Island is Cranston. And the majority of the individuals who are did that growth are the black and brown communities. And that's what I decided to do this particular um, session with Cranston City Councilors because I was very pleased to see that this year there's 4 individuals, and I also want to excuse Anise Germain, who was supposed to be with us, but due to last minute changes, won't be joining us. But tonight I have the pleasure of having Councilwoman Lammis Vargas, uh, council candidates Don Roach, and also Larry Warner. They are seeking elected office in Cranston, and very much is true. Well, I'm going to be an optimist. When they all win, the Cranston City Council is going to become very diverse and very different than what it has been. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being part of this conversation. And with that, I'm going to give each one of you a minute to, do your introductory remarks, and then we'll start the conversation. I usually leave it up to whoever wants to get started. If not, then I point.
I'll go first if that's okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Great. So first and foremost, Tomas, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for all the work that you have done for our state, for our community, and that you continue to do. Much needed, of course. So again, thank you to all. Um, I've I've been in office only about close to almost 2 years already. I got elected clearly in 2018. I did seek election in 2016, and I was unsuccessful. However, 2 years ago, I decided to run once again to represent uh, the residents of Ward 1 here in the city of Cranston. I think we've come far, and there's a lot more to be done. I want to continue to be a voice for not just the Latino community and the color community as a whole, but make sure that I'm a voice for each and every one of our residents, for our sorry, our small business owners at the very same time, and continue to make sure that we have a um, fiscally responsible government, right? And that I'm able to continue to promote strong schools, protection of our environment, the quality of life that we all want, continue to modernize the city government, but definitely to have racial um, equality in our city where everyone feels welcome and inclusive to be living in our great city of Cranston. So there aren't too many women in office. There obviously has not been a woman of color in the city of Cranston. I'm a mother of two, one of which is, is my daughter, of course. And so I want to make sure that we have representation, that all the little girls and the children that are out in our city, and obviously throughout as well, can make sure that they have a role model to look for. And our city clearly has been underrepresented in the voice as far as the underrepresented community that we are in terms of representing the people of color. So that was many of the reasons as to why I decided to run in 2018. And of course, a lot of the things that were happening at the federal level also made sure that give me more of a reason as to why I wanted to run. And here I am today running for re-election once again in the city of Cranston, because I still believe that there's still a lot of work to be done. And I hope to continue to have the support of many of our residents, and continue to work with the newly elected council members as well, despite of party lines, to continue to move the city forward.
Thank you, Lammis. Next.
I can go next, Tomas. I'm Don Roach. I live on Hybrid Drive in Garden City. I'm running for City Council Citywide in Cranston. And, a little bit about myself. I grew up in New Jersey, born in Philadelphia. I moved to Rhode Island in 1995, attended Brown University. And then my wife is from Providence, and so I just stayed in Rhode Island after that, and have made my home here ever since. Have lived in the city of Cranston for the past 13 years, lived over in Edgewood, ran for city council back in 2010 against Councilman Stikos. He won and beat me pretty badly, but I at least made him work for it. And now I'm back and just trying to represent the residents of Cranston, and to be an advocate, and just really excited for the opportunity to speak tonight, Tomas, and the questions you have sent to us, and the dialogue that I can have with Lammis and Larry, and just really excited to give folks an opportunity to see the diversity even amongst this group right here. And just show how folks in the city of Cranston really care about this city, and that people have a variety of choices this coming election season.
Thank you, Don. Larry?
Thank you, Tomas. Echoing the sentiments of Lammis and Don, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be part of this discussion tonight. and for the work that you've done in support of the community and for being an example and role model for many, in addition to the tangible impact that you've had. I also owe a debt of gratitude to Lammis for being a trailblazer in the council and for being someone that people can look up to in the community and see themselves in that role. And so thank you for that. About myself, Larry Warner, I'm running as a Democratic candidate for Citywide Council in Cranston. And I'm running for the first time, hoping to bring some new ideas and perspectives to the role and build on my personal and professional experiences to support our residents across the city and work in collaboration with others on the council and the mayor that we'll have elected at the end of this cycle. I'm excited about the city. I've been in Cranston for just over 12 years. Grew up in the neighboring state to Don. Grew up in New York, also came to Rhode Island to attend Brown University, fell in love with Rhode Island, and have lived in a couple of different communities. But my wife and I, after we got married, we were looking for a community where we could envision raising our children and that had a good school system. And so we came to Cranston and we fell in love with Cranston. Had lived in Woodridge for the past 12 years. And I would say that over time, through my professional experiences, I've gotten more and more involved in discussions around policy and have a public health background that have helped me to understand the importance of local decision making. And so, the factors that impact our quality of life or the resilience or lack thereof in neighborhoods is really determined by local policymakers and the legislative priorities and investment priorities at the local level. And so it's through those experiences and perspectives that I became interested in running for city council. Last year, started having some initial conversations with colleagues and friends who live in Cranston, and was well received through those conversations and with ward committees around the city. And so I stuck with it. I've been on the campaign trail, safely distanced, wearing a mask and having conversations with residents around the city. A lot of people who are excited to have a diverse candidate, potentially an additional diverse candidate, potentially representing them in municipal government, but also someone who understands some of the frustrations that we all have in daily life and want to do better and do right by all of our residents. And so I'm looking forward to this evening's conversation and encourage folks who are watching to be part of the discussion as well, both tonight and going forward.
Great. Thank you very much. And so far, you saw 3 of the 4 are transplant for another state, because I moved from Boston back in 93. And it's interesting because I moved for job reasons, but and the typical, being close, initially, it was like, okay, I'm just going to commute. Here I am, almost 27 years after, still here and enjoying it. And just like everyone else, enjoying Rhode Island and enjoying, the experiment that Rhode Island gives us. So everybody pretty much mentioned part of the reason why you're running, but I'm still going to ask the question because I want to give you the opportunity to the specifics. What drove each one of you to seek elected office? Anyone?
Any one of us?
Yep. Lammis?
Go ahead.
Ladies
Councilor,
first.
you go
right?
first.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So as I kind of noted earlier and kind of added it as to why I'm running and why I decided to run in 2018 and continuing to run, this year. And I did have to put in a quick, I was born and raised in Rhode Island. Everybody's coming into the city of Cranston. So that's a great thing, right? Because that means Cranston definitely, at least for Don and for Larry, definitely has something that Rhode Island in itself has a state that can offer so much. But in terms to pretty much your, the reason why I'm running is, as I mentioned, I think diversity on the city is extremely important subject. Continuing for me to make sure that we have not diversity just within, not just where everyone feels welcome, but that we have diversity in our city boards, and that we continue to also have representation of people who look like us to work in the administration, to work at City Hall as well, and make sure that that's a place that is all part of inclusiveness, right? That we want to make sure that when someone goes into City Hall, everyone is welcome in that sense. So, I'm also running because I'm big on school safety, and so the whole gun safety laws was another reason why I really felt that I needed to advocate for those rights for our children and for our educators and their families. And another, I always say that I'm running for at least for a few reasons, right? But at the end of the day, when you go door knocking, your reasons tend to change a little bit because you end up knowing a little bit more about your community and what the residents' issues are. So in walking, I was hearing a lot about vacant buildings and just properties in general, and that comes with residential properties that were a nuisance to neighbors. And because of that, I think that we have accomplished and we moved in the right direction, but I'd like to continue to move forward to make sure that we continue to make sure that we keep people accountable and that they live in a place where it's not an eyesore in the sense. I also, just making sure that for me, it's not just quality of life in city government, but as I also noted earlier, it's the environment, right? Ward 1 has a very interesting dynamic of demographics in the sense that we actually have a nice view of our water and our bays that are right here in the ward. And so although I don't have the beautiful view per se in my house, it's a great thing for me to make sure that I advocate for the environment. And so we can touch base on that, or probably in some of the other questions that you may have later about the environment in itself. But it's making sure also that we have going back to the inclusivity of making sure that we have police department and a fire department and administration and a school department that reflects the demographics in our city. So there's so much at stake. There's so much happening at the federal level. So for me, that's another reason why I'm running. I want to continue to make sure that while I've been able to deliver small and large, that I can continue to be able to be the voice for so many.
Thank you. Harry?
Sure. So I'm running because piggybacking on what I started to talk about earlier. One, as I see this as an extension of service to the community. I currently work at United Way of Rhode Island and lead a team there that's working on issues around housing, education, jobs, and financial stability. And all of those factors are important to creating thriving communities and resilient communities. And so I've had an opportunity to guide investments, but also to be engaged in policy work that supports our residents around the state, including Cranston. I also, before that, led the health work at the Rhode Island Foundation, working directly in the healthcare and social determinants of health space. And before that, I was a firefighter and EMT in Providence for 15 years. And so on the front lines as a first responder, both running into burning buildings and serving in emergency medical services and emergency communications. And lastly, before leaving the fire department, worked in their division of training and professional development and was involved in the recruitment and hiring and promotion process. And so all of these different perspectives have helped to inform my thinking about community and how access to resources or lack thereof impact not only a neighborhood's ability to thrive or a household's ability to thrive, but what things look like at the city level as well. And it was through a series of experiences on the fire department that I was motivated to go back to school. Brown loved my money so much, they took it twice. And so I pursued a master's degree in public health at Brown and had an opportunity to contribute in different ways to supporting the community. Some of it included helping to develop a quality improvement program for the EMS division. Some of it was serving on work groups in the community or with the Department of Health. And all these different ways of contributing to the community benefited the community clearly, but also helped to inform and round out my perspective on what makes communities thrive and healthy and strong. And so in my subsequent roles at the Rhode Island Foundation and then most recently at United Way, I have had an opportunity to have increasingly broader impact in the community and also to go deep when necessary and to work alongside partners to say, or to facilitate conversations between stakeholders that may be working in discrete and different areas, but collectively their work is pointing towards the same end goal. And going back to something I said earlier, it's really local level decision making about policies and investment priorities, how we fund our schools, how we support small businesses, how we support infrastructure in a way that's equitable, so that not one side of the city is, one side of the city is in disrepair and the other side has golden streets. That shouldn't be the experience, but that's how a lot of people feel in Cranston. And so I'm hoping to bring an equity lens to the role and work alongside other council members who are like-minded in supporting our residents across the city, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, education level, or the neighborhood you live in. And that's why I'm running.
Done.
So yeah, I'll go. So I have basically three reasons why I'm running. The first and probably foremost reason why I'm running is I want to be an advocate for the residents of Cranston. And whether you support me, whether you vote for me, whether you don't vote for me, if I'm elected, you can give me a call and I will be an advocate for the issues that are affecting you. Doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but reason why I want to is that I listen to people and I like listening to people. I like listening to problems. That was the thing that I loved about running in 2010 and love running now is just talking to people, going door to door and having conversations. It's kind of weird with COVID, some people are very averse to having a conversation, whereas some are want to have a conversation, but I just want to be folks advocates. That's reason number one. Number two is I want to be accessible, and I want to be a city council person who you can find in the city and who's walking around the city, seeing what's going on in the city, talking to neighbors and residents and kids about, what are the issues that are affecting us today, and doing whatever I can to be there and to kind of fight for those issues. And so I think the third thing is being accountable. And so when I ran in 2010 in Ward 1, two of the big issues were a CVS and a Stop and Shop coming to the community. And I felt like at that time, many of the residents felt that our current councilor just wasn't really accountable for some of the votes and actions that he took on the council. And so for me, I definitely plan to be accountable to the residents for votes and actions that I take. We're facing an unprecedented time. We've got some budget issues that we're going to be facing that are going to be insane for this next mayor and council. And I want to be accountable, as Mayor Fung was when he first kind of was elected as mayor. When he raised property taxes, he sent out letters to the community in terms of this is why I'm raising taxes and this is what I'm planning to do, and was able to do that for the first couple of years, and then didn't have to do that or found other ways to do that for several years after that. And so for me, I want to tell voters that I'm going to be accountable to you for the votes that I take and listen to your concerns and needs, and always be an advocate for your issues and concerns. So those are the three reasons why I decided to run.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody mentioned door to door, which is, needless to say, interesting with this at this time. But Lammis mentioned something that is very important. That when you go to door, you already have an agenda, you already have a platform, but as you visit the neighborhoods and the neighbors who live there, they always bring something that, something new, something that is important to them. And as Larry mentioned, city council is the closest segment of government to the communities. So therefore, just like all of you mentioned, it's very important that you be attuned to what the community actually wants and what the community expects, besides the vision that each one of you have for the different wards and the whole city of Cranston. I'm going to deviate from the questions a little bit, and it's because Lammis mentioned the police department. And the reason I want to talk about, I was going to leave it to the end, but I want to address it is because I was involved back in 2000 when with the city of Cranston regarding the diversity of this police department, the police and fire. And back then, needless to say, it wasn't. But then also there was a lot of resistance to diversifying those two units. I know there has been some changes that have taken place, and I read recently that there's many, many more plans to continue that change. What is each one of you plan regarding the police and fire department, that diversification that has been long coming, but at the same time, from what I remember, and like I said, I was actively participant, how difficult it was, and how things have changed. But again, how do you plan to address that particular issue, which is very key for the diverse communities of Cranston?
Can I take this one? Can I go first on this one?
Sure.
I think this is a great question, Tomas. And I think if my numbers are accurate, and they might not be, Lammis, you may know these better than I do, but I think the fire department doesn't have a person of color on the fire department today. I think that's accurate. And so if you look at that, you could assume and say, well, the fire department doesn't support diversity. You could say that. But I met with the fire union president this past week, and I also met with the president of the police union, and they support diversity. They support diversity in a true and genuine way. And I think that what we need to do is to go out into our communities and bring our police and fire into the communities and show them that they're real people. Show them that they're putting their lives on the line every day for us, and that the men and women who put on those uniforms respect all of us. And I think that we've got to change the narrative a bit and have a dialogue around why is there so much why is there fear in some parts of our community? I can speak to, I don't know where you want to take this, but I can speak to some of the national stuff that has happened that puts fear into my heart and my kids' heart as well. But what I can say is that I feel like there's a commitment within the police and fire departments in Cranston to support diverse and qualified candidates. And I think there's a commitment from them to support all qualified candidates. And I think it's more about how do we get there? And I think as a city council person and as a person who works within the diversity space, as in my job, I would be very well equipped to help lead those conversations, help talk to folks who have maybe differing views and opinions, and help bring them together, because the dialogue is key. And without dialogue, people stay in their camps and we don't move. So that is what I would do to address the problem or address the issue and concern around diversity within our police and fire. Start a dialogue with the community, help residents figure out how do we apply, when are the application dates, and really just change the narrative.
And I just want to interject a moment because I want to address an issue that I know was a problem 20 years ago, and I'm quite sure it continues to be a problem. 20 years ago, part of the problem was the unions. It was back then there was this very much rule that the city of Cranston cannot hire minorities directly into neither one of those departments. And very much needless to say, it's based on the testing. And with Mayor Laffey, I was very involved in conversation, negotiations with both units, communities, in trying to find a way to find exceptions, not necessarily, just give away the positions, but that was the issue 20 years ago. And from what I've seen, the way things haven't moved much, I think there's an issue, but again, just want to bring that point to the conversation. Lammis.
Yeah.
Oh, Larry.
No, it's okay. I'll go on. Go ahead, Larry.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Don, for those thoughts. And I think there are some points that you raised that are legitimate around the commitment of the respective unions to diversity. I had a good conversation with the firefighters union a month or so ago, and I'm hopeful that there will be progress that's made in the near future. Having worn the uniform, I can speak from experience that you have to be intentional in the process in order to create or facilitate a diverse candidate pool, a qualified candidate pool. I think it does require being present in the community, being visible, having non-emergent interactions, both on the police side and the fire side, so that healthy relationships can be made between public safety employees and the community. But that doesn't alleviate the fact that individuals and communities have experienced trauma. And that's a very real thing that no amount of interaction with the community will erase. And there's always going to be someone who is hesitant because either they had a family member who had a negative interaction, and that's going to shape their worldview or shape their next interaction with public safety. That said, I would say that we have to be strategic in how we market these opportunities, and with exposure to up and coming youth in high schools, through community-based organizations, through making the requirements known, so that if there's a hiring process that kicks off next month, that's way too late for somebody to start to go work on an EMT license that takes roughly 6 months to complete, and then testing and all that. So there are opportunities to plant the seed earlier, but there's also a need to set the right job requirements. And I'm not saying lower the standards, because I don't believe in lowering standards. I believe in setting the right standards. And having been in the training and professional development role, I know that there's different ways that you can approach hiring and training and equipping qualified candidates to be successful in the job. And ultimately the goal is serving the community. And so I'll end by saying that regardless of the strategies that we employ, we need to do something different. And we need a collective and unified front between the administration, the labor unions, the community-based organizations in order to reach our goal, which is a workforce that's more reflective of the rich diversity of the city. And I say rich because diversity is an asset, it's not a burden. And all too often people see diversity and inclusion and equity work as a burden. And it really, it can only make your team, your department, your city stronger.
Lammis?
So I definitely would agree with some of the points that both Larry and obviously Don have said. Definitely with Larry more so, and in that case, it's more of, obviously, yes, we do not have any one of color in our fire department. We definitely have members of the police department that are employed and that are of color. And so again, it goes back to establishing a relationship, as is one of the points that I think that both Larry and Don touched base on, right? Is that we need to make sure that we establish this relationship, whether it's with fire, whether it's police, whether it's with the teachers union, which is with the superintendent, just overall, it's not just our police and fire, but it's also within our schools, because we want to make sure that there is a hiring of educators as well. And by educators, I don't mean just teachers aid, right? But there's educators there as well. So, in the administration, but mainly, the reason why I'm saying that relationship is I too have had conversations with our fire union president. I've also had conversation with her police chief, and they've all been very, very respectful conversations. And I think they both understand that there's obviously a need, and they are willing to definitely work with all of us. And there was a diversity commission that was active, as you had noted, Tomas, many years ago, and it was reactivated again. And I'm happy to be one of the 2 council members who serve on that diversity commission. And the diversity commission data, as a matter of fact, there was a presentation at last night's Cranston City Council meeting, and it was, you know, it's a recommendation of the fact of, we all know that there needs to be diversity throughout, but what can we do to make sure that we get diversity also in a fire department? And I did a ride along with the fire department, and I've done a ride along with the police department, because for me it's interesting to make sure is what a day look like in the day of a firefighter and a police department and any other department in the city. For example, even like the Cranston Senior Center as well, where I ended up spending a day. But the Diversity Commission had came up with a lot of recommendations, short term and long term. And so for us, it was a data that we were trying to get from families and from people who live in our city to find out how do you know about employment? How do you find out when the city is hiring? How do you find out on the recruitment for a police and a fire department? And many said that they weren't, you know, too sure or so. But then that's where, you know, our personnel department in our city has a recruitment list as to where to go and post this information as to when there's a recruitment. But most importantly, Tomas, for me, is also making sure, kind of to Larry's point, was that we build a relationship and we continue to build a relationship, because we've already have relationships going, but it's continue to foster those relationships with not just community-based organizations, but our schools. We have seniors in high school, and try to build that relationship, not just during recruitment time, but before that takes place. And again, making sure that as far as, and religious organization, faith-based organizations, you know, as well, but making sure that we're able to establish that relationship, not just during recruitment. And real quickly, just for lack of time as well, is also to make sure that when the police is also in our neighborhood, I think Larry kind of alluded a little bit to this, is that they're there because they're part of the community policing, because they're trying to establish that relationship with us, and not because they're there on a call, right? And so when you foster that, you understand that there is a relationship going forward. And so for us is making sure that, at least for, I can speak for myself, is that the Diversity Commission is something that has started. While some may think it's not effective, I really think that it is, and that we continue to have that dialogue going, and that it doesn't just deactivate and it stops after an election year, right? That we continue going, because that's often the problem. Yes. We activate it when there's a huge problem going on nationally, statewide, in our own cities and towns, and then it stops. So for me, and I hope whoever is the next mayor and the members of the council, is that we continue to work on that relationship. We've seen corporations, colleges and university hire diversity officers as well. I really believe that we should be doing something along those lines as well. And it's not just grant funded, but an actual position that is sustainable, because grants are great, but they're only for an XYZ period of time. So if we are able to provide or do partnership with even businesses and corporations, even in our own city, that are able to partner with us that way, that may be one thing. But I do have to say that I had a conversation with the fire department and a police department. They're part of our diversity commission, actually, and they do attend and they are listening to us. So I can't say that they're not, because I would be speaking against that. But I have to say, when we're in that diversity commission, it's a makeup of not just council members and delegates from each department or city department, but it's also members of our community. And it's not just and it's not just Latinos and African Americans, but we have people from other countries as well, that makes the melting pot of who we are in this country, right? So I think that's my point on that, is making sure that we definitely continue to move forward and increase that.
Great, thank you. And I like your last qualifier, and you had mentioned it at the beginning, you know, because when we talk about diversity, it's not black and brown. Diversity is multicultural, multi-ethnicities, multi whatever we call it. So, because needless to say, the political lines in this country has been about black and white, but it's not about black and white any longer. It's about the diversity that makes this great nation and these great cities and state that we live in. So thank you for making that qualifier, because I totally agree with you. Larry mentioned a key word that is whenever I'm involved in any initiative, in particular with government, is the word intentional. Because experience has taught us there's great laws written all over this country, all over this state. There's great initiatives, that have been started, but in my humble opinion, what's been lacking is the intention to make it work, the intention to make it successful. I will add to what Lammis mentioned, is part of the reason is because many of these initiatives tend to take place when we are in trouble, when the country is in trouble, when the city is in trouble, when the state is in trouble. As an example, I was involved in the whole movement when Colonel Young was killed back 21 years ago. And the conversation that we are having today is the same conversation that we had back then. And it was the same initiatives. That's why this time I say, I don't want no conversations, I want action. And again, actions come from being intentional to make changes. So thank you all for your comments. And I was just checking the time. I don't want to abuse your time, but my God, time goes by fast when you're having fun. And you guys are great with your answers. So, but so we talk about what got you to run and everything else. Anything that you feel that the communities need to know, that you would like the community to know about each one of you? Anything? Cool.
Is that our closing remark?
No, not yet. No, not too fast.
Okay.
Don't do that.
No, that's fine. Just checking. I can say that as far as what I want the community just to know, whether it's about Cranston or myself, I would assume it would be more of myself or the campaign in general, is that we have a lot of issues. We have a lot of issues nationally, we have a lot of issues statewide, but obviously our concern is definitely not just our state, but the city that we're running for office for. And absolutely accountability is big, and accessibility. And I can say that, I've had community meetings because kind of Don touched base on that a little bit, but is making sure that you're accessible to your constituency. So that's one thing about me. I don't have a problem giving out my cell phone and giving out my email. I want to make sure that it's whatever concerns that they may have, or even suggestions for as well for the city is very, very welcomed. I have to say that, and I don't think we've touched base on this, but one of the issues that I'm hoping that we are able to do is have a great need. There's a great need for, obviously, for equity, but it's making sure that we have a woman business enterprise, minority business enterprise, veteran business enterprise. And there's been a lot of conversations, obviously, lately a lot about that. But in Cranston, we don't even have that in our books. And so for me, it's extremely important. I've actually introduced an ordinance, which will be heard at the next committee in next month. I believe it might be ordinance. I have to double check again which one it was referred to, but there's a need for that. There's a conversation on that. Another thing about me is making sure that, affordable housing is a huge issue. Where I can say for Cranston, and it's interesting on the Rhode Island, I think it's Housework Fact Book from 2019, I'm sorry. There was pretty much, in order to rent a 2-bedroom in Cranston, I believe the household income should be roughly about $64,000. And that's only for a 2-bedroom. And we don't have many people in our committee. Cranston is great. We have the western side of Cranston also that has a lot of land and a lot of property. And we have the parts of Cranston that are very dense, where the house is literally side by side, where people sometimes don't even have we don't have overnight parking, so that's, I don't want to touch base on that. But in the sense, there's people that are living so tight within the community that there's a need to talk about affordable housing in the households. So the democratic income one is huge. The median income, I want to say it's roughly in the 70,000s. And so that's concerning. So affordable housing for me is something that I'm now trying to also approach and work on with my other council colleague in the city. So I think that's huge. And so when it comes to affordable housing and in our schools and our environment, that's something that I'm looking forward to working on, and just systematic inequalities as well. So we can touch base later on if you'd like on the whole COVID, because that's
yes, that's the next one.
on that. But definitely that's just a little bit about me. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a mother of two. We're both are students of the Cranston public school system. And so I'm extremely passionate for what I do. And we can all attest, we're not doing it because of the money. We're doing it because we passionately believe in it. If you don't have the passion for it, then you're not going to have the motivation to make sure that you're the voice for your community. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
So you mean we're not going to get rich if we win? Okay, I'm done. I'm out. I'll go next. I guess things that I would love for voters to know about me are, I have a master's in accounting. I'm a finance kind of numbers guy. And so, like I said, I think maybe before we started taping, Tomas, you were talking about just the challenges that are going to be facing the city from a budget standpoint. And I would really love to leverage the experiences that I have, putting together billion-dollar budgets and put that to use in the community. And that's a business. And it's theoretical. Business accounting is very different than, say, city government accounting. But I definitely would love to put that to use because as a city, we're facing significant budgetary challenges, and we're going to need somebody there who's got some experience dealing with those types of issues. At my job, I work for Liberty Mutual, which is a Fortune 100 company. I am a chair of a committee that is part of our employee resource group. It's called Liberty Employees of African Descent and Allies. So it's called LEDA for short. And I am the chair of the advancement and development part of that ERG, we call it Employee Resource Group. And my role in there is to help advance the careers of people of color, of our affinity members. And I'm doing a ton of work in that space. And I just do that work because it's important to me. I write a blog series at my job. It's called On the Road to Diversity. And my very first blog post was titled, "Where Are All the Black Dudes?" And so one of the things that I bring to this role is just being able to bring together people who may feel like they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but being able to have a conversation and show them how much commonality they have and lead towards, like, we're on the same journey and the same path. And Larry mentioned a very good word and when he was talking about intentionality. It's critical to be intentional and then also take action and then hold yourself accountable for those actions that you're taking. And there are things that we can try and we might fail. It might be the wrong thing to try to do, but if we don't take action, we're not going to see anything different. And to your point, Tomas, you were talking about the officer who was killed about 21 years ago or so, and I remember that. I was in college, and you're right, had some of those same conversations then. I actually posted again recently on my my job. I posted about an article I'd written in 1997 at Brown, talking about these same issues around race, and we're having this same conversation today. And so the question is, how do we do it differently? And I think the difference that I hope to bring is that partnership and that thought process of we are in this together. It's not a people of color problem. It's not a problem with the police department or the fire department. It's like, who do we want to be and what legacy do we want to leave for our children? Do we want to leave them with a world that is significantly more diverse and the equality is there? Or do we want to leave them with these same problems so that they're talking about these same issues, in 20 some odd years from now? And so I definitely want the voters to know that I have experience working in this space, and it's not what I do, it's really who I am. And, I also way back in the day wrote a white paper on helping former felons get the right to vote. And we had the right to vote campaign. It's several years ago now. And, I just thought it was crazy that people were on parole or probation but couldn't vote. And so the state changed that law. And, like I said, I want the people to know that I'm very excited about working for the city of Cranston and being someone who brings a lot of knowledge and experience to bring people together to work towards a solution. And that's, I think, for me, if I were to say the difference that the type of difference that I make would be that.
Larry.
Thank you, Tomas. So it's been an exciting conversation tonight to learn more about my fellow panelists and to discuss the topics that you've shared for us, Tomas. A couple of things I would want folks viewing to know about me is that one, I bring a variety of experiences which are helpful not only to understanding the community's perspective on some of the challenges and opportunities that we're facing, but also leadership and conveners perspective as well. And through the roles I've had in philanthropy or with state and entities, or even locally, having participated and facilitated discussions around what does it mean to be an American, in having that conversation in Cranston, it's been an interesting opportunity to bring together people who have come.
Oh, I think that got cut off.
Did we lose Larry?
Yeah, seems like yeah, he's frozen. Well,
Oh, there he
Hello,
is.
oh,
I'm
there
back.
he is.
I'm sorry. So I was saying that we all are aiming for the same American dream, and however, because of historical barriers and challenges, different communities, different neighborhoods, different populations are experiencing different challenges along the way. And I believe it's important to be, Don talked about this a little bit, but to bridge the gap between different experiences and perspectives. And I would say that in the course of door knocking, I've the most rewarding conversations that I've had aren't the ones with Democrats that I'm hoping will vote for me in the primary or in the general election. It's with independents and Republicans who we start off at different points of view, whether it's about the Second Amendment or other issues. And when we have a heart-to-heart conversation about why equity and intentionality around equity and diversity is important, we start on a journey together. And when we end that conversation and I go off to the next door, the response has generally been, I appreciate how you broke that down for me. And I've thought about it, I hadn't thought about it that way. And so I don't expect to change my plan and expectations that I'm not going to change people's minds every step of the way or every conversation I have. But my goal is to be a convener of different parts of the city to support important work that's already underway in our city, that's being led by the Diversity Commission and by One Cranston and by the Health Equity Zone. Those are important initiatives that need to be supported at the municipal level as well. But as elected leaders, we have, as an aspiring elected leader and hoping to join Lammis and others on the council, we have a responsibility to support those initiatives, to be responsive, accessible, and to add to what Don and Lammis have said already, to be transparent as well. And I think that that's something that people yearn for. A lot of times they don't understand how decisions are made or why decisions are made. And I think that that's important, and we owe that to our residents, regardless of what neighborhood they're in, what background, how long they've been in Cranston. We owe transparency, accessibility, and responsiveness. And so that's enough about my worldview. The last personal notes I would share is that I also have boys who are in the Cranston Elementary and Middle School. Leave the names out, but they're in Cranston Public Schools, an older stepson that graduated from Cranston West, and so I have a vested interest in the well-being, in their well-being, and in the strength and resilience of our neighborhoods and our schools, and investing adequately and equitably, and believe that together we can build a stronger Cranston. We can build on the successes that we've had to date. We can chart a path forward for a stronger future. And obviously we're still dealing with the health and economic challenges of COVID-19, but I think that there's an opportunity to deal the cards, to play with the cards that were dealt to us, and to do our best to put Cranston on a strong footing for the future.
Tomas, can I add something if that's okay? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. And that's something that Larry actually touched base with, which I think is also extremely important, is education, right? We want to educate people on how our local government and government overall works. But I think there's definitely a need where people sometimes don't know where to go. And so I think it's also up to us to make sure to also help out, bring in get rid of those gaps and bridge in those relationships, to tell people, if you have an issue on certain topic, this is what you can do. You can reach out to, you start off with, say, maybe your city council person. And how do I find out who my city council person is? And the way it works. So they might be, you can ask them to put something on the city council docket, or, call the mayor's office, and how laws locally are made. And there's been a lot of education on that side, but I still think that that's definitely a need to make sure that we educate our community as to how government works, and not just voting is extremely important. Don't get me wrong, it's great, but we need to also do a work on making sure that we can all educate our.
I totally agree. I know I'm aging myself, but when I came to this country, they were still teaching civics. So everything that I learned about government was in a civic class, and it's the greatest political lesson I ever learned. Of community, the responsibility of being a citizen of this great nation and each neighborhood. We were going to talk about COVID, but we are very much out of time. So I'm going to give you, if you can keep your closing remarks very brief. We still have like 8 minutes, but I don't want us to lose the connection because I made it for an hour and 15 minutes. So we want to go first, very brief, your closing remarks. If not, then I'll close it.
Thank you again for bringing us together, Tomas, for this very important conversation. The most important thing that people can do in the very near future is be counted in the census. If you haven't already been, vote in the September primary and in the November general election, and then be sure to support candidates that are intentional and have a commitment to equity. And I'm hoping to be considered by our community as one of those representatives of our neighborhoods as a citywide council member, and look forward to continuing the conversation and engaging with our residents.
Lammis?
Sure. So, in closing, I would definitely say, I'll echo what Larry said, definitely the census. That's definitely a huge component on that. Just real quickly, 20 years ago, when the United States Census was done, it was about roughly about 14% Latinos, maybe 6% African Americans, and about 6 or so as well Asians living in Cranston. The number is continuously increasing. Definitely 10 years later, we can see it. I can feel it. And so absolutely, I think there's a need for that to continue to receive funding. Other than that is also making sure that people vote in the primary, and that you can vote already today at your local city hall. You can vote in person now up until September 8th. And so that's extremely important that we exercise our civic duty, which is voting. and absolutely vote in the November election as well. That's extremely important, and we have a strong voice. And if we want a lot of change and we want to continue to move our city forward, it's just educate yourself on the candidates, that are running for election. I am running unopposed. However, for me, it's extremely important to continue to make sure that I door knock while practicing the whole socially distancing, and making sure that I can continue to engage with our community and know what the issues are of importance to them, and continue to advocate on items like I've mentioned earlier, whether it's racial justice in Cranston, on diversity and city boards and commission, which has been a big passion as well of mine, our schools, we're modernizing city government as well. And the environment is huge, and the environment can be a big component of things, whether it could be from protection of our bay to economic, racial disparities as well, and how the economic has been a problem over health and so forth over time. But either way, I just want to make sure that I'm able to be accessible to each and every one of you. And if anybody has any questions at all or any suggestions, know that I am here to listen, and that I am continuing to work on behalf of all the residents of Cranston. Obviously, I'm elected in Ward 1, but I think at the end of the day, when we take a vote, it's a vote that affects the entire city, not just the ward, unless it's about a stop sign, particularly in our ward. But at the end of the day, even that stop sign takes a vote from all of us to come in together, have a dialogue, have a conversation, whether we agree or we disagree in a very respectful manner is extremely important. And so, I look forward in working with the 5 new members in the Cranston City Council come January. And I want to thank each and every one. If there's any Cranstonians that are on Facebook or will be watching this, I hopefully hope that you consider me in November once again to continue to work that has not been fully finished, and continue to be a strong voice for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Don?
Yeah. So one thing I did not mention is that I'm a father of 3 boys. They're 17, 14, and 12. And my oldest son is autistic, and have very much appreciated working with the city in getting him into an appropriate school, and have really appreciated the school administration and their part in that work, which has certainly been a challenge over the years. I think the thing I would like for folks to take away for me as a candidate is that you're going to just get a different kind of style. The way that I'm talking to you all is the same way I talk to senior leaders in my organization. I'm just the same person. And that genuineness is what you see is what you get, for good or for bad. I'm here down in my basement. I got my hat on. This is who I am. And I'm just excited to partner with residents of Cranston to make a real difference and change in our community. We've got things like Costco, who wants to come in, and I like Costco, but not necessarily taking residents' concerns and opinions into consideration. And for me, what I want to do is, if elected, I really would love to start a city commission quasi-organization of residents, also matched with council people and other members of the government, who really take a proactive stance on how do we improve areas of our city that we want to improve. Say Lammis, the corner of Warwick and Park Avenue, or Rolfe Square, and really don't let developments come in and then we react to it, but really try to work with the owners of these places and try to come up with smart development. And I just really want to help the residents have a proactive, active voice, and they're not always on the defense. And so, I really would love to have the opportunity to do that. I am running as a Republican, and I just think that we need a different style of thinking and try to do things a little bit differently if we really want to see the type of change that we're hoping to see in our city and for our kids' future.
Well, thank you very much. And, once again, thank you so much. There was so much to cover, but I wanted to talk specifically about Cranston because, again, Cranston is going through changes. Every one of you is part of that
Good one.
change. Yeah, good. And so the promise is this: after you get elected, we're gonna give you some time to make up your energies, and then we're going to have another conversation about what it is to be an elected official, a re-elected official. With that, thank you very much. Have a good night. Have a blessed night. And thank you, everyone who's been watching. Good night.
Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Tomas.
I think it's the last.
Bye-bye.